Good afternoon, everyone. The Organizational Development Standing Committee of the Richmond City Council will now come to order. Mr. Clark, I do believe we have a quorum. And if you would proceed with reading the emergency evacuation announcement and public speaker guidelines.
Emergency evacuation announcement. Upon activation of the emergency alarm signal, all persons should immediately exit the building. Please use the exits to the left or right front of the council chamber or the east or west stairwell outside the rear doors of the chamber. Do not use elevators or escalators. After exiting the building, security will direct everyone down 9th Street to the assembly area located inside the former public safety building parking lot. Able persons should assist visually and hearing impaired visitors with exiting the building. Individuals wishing to speak during public hearings are generally allowed 3 minutes to speak. Persons appearing before the committee are not allowed to campaign for public office, promote private business ventures, use language of a personal nature which insults or demeans any person, including comments directed at public officials or staff members that are not related to their official duties, or address or question staff members directly. All questions are to be directed to the committee chair. Failure to adhere to the guidelines may result in speakers forfeiting any remaining time and further disciplinary action as necessary, which could include barring from attendance at future committee meetings for a period of 6 months.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Members, pursuant to Rule 3D 4B of Council's Rules of Procedure, Committee Member Andrew Breton has made a request to participate in this meeting by Microsoft Teams due to his participation in a work conference being held in Orlando, Florida. He will participate from the Coronado Springs Resort at 1001 West Buena Vista Drive, Lake Buena Vista, Florida, 32830. The committee members present must adopt a motion to approve Mr. Breton's participation in this meeting by electronic communication means if it is that it appears to us that his request complies with Rule 3D of Council's Rules of Procedure. At this time, pursuant to Council's rules, I will solicit a motion from those members physically assembled approving Mr. Breton's participation in this meeting by electronic communication means. So moved.
Second.
Committee is now voting on a motion to approve Mr. Breton's remote participation in the meeting via Microsoft Teams. Ms. Gibson,
Yes.
Ms. Jones,
Aye.
Ms. Robertson,
Aye.
Ms. Lynch,
Aye.
Vice Chair Jordan,
Aye.
Chair Newbill.
Aye.
That motion has been approved.
Thank you, members. With that, Mr. Clerk, let's proceed to the approval of the minutes.
Madam Chair, the minutes to be approved are from the Monday, January 5th, 2026 Organizational Development Standing Committee meeting. If there are no corrections or amendments, then the minutes will be approved as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Okay, with that, the next item on our agenda is non-departmental annual impact report and overview of non-departmental process. Welcome, Mr. Barrett.
Oh, right, there we go. Good afternoon, almost evening. Chair Newbill, Vice Chair Jordan, members of council, Dominic Barrett, Senior Policy Advisor in the office, in the Human Services portfolio. I'm happy to be here with you today. I will be giving part of our presentation, and then the DCO will be joining us for the second portion of the presentation. We're going to, between the two of us, try to achieve a few different things. There's a lot to squeeze into a small period of time, so we'll do our best to both provide a summary and ensure your understanding of FY25 investments and outcomes that were made and that are summarized in a spreadsheet that was shared with you all on Saturday. We want to provide an overview of the FY25 and 26 processes, especially process improvements, some of which we spoke to you about last year, others that are new. And we also want to conclude, of course, with details on the new FY27 external grant maker-based model that we are currently developing and working through the RFP process for. So with that being said, let's dive right in. So just to level set, make sure we're all clear on our language here. This is it. The city has historically provided charitable one-year grants to area nonprofits through what was formerly or sometimes still known as the non-departmental grant program, more recently referred to as our outside agency grant program. You'll probably hear us both use those terms somewhat interchangeably. These are grants that enable the city to meet unmet critical community needs and advance strategic goals of the city. We are one of the biggest funders in the Richmond region, and our funding not only helps achieve the specific services that we're investing in, and we know many of our nonprofits then leverage our investment to access additional private and philanthropic dollars, thus amplifying the impact of every dollar that we are investing. Key point here, these grants through this particular annual competitive process is distinct from other federal and other grant programs that the city manages throughout the year and throughout a variety of departments. And of course, these grants in particular that we're talking about today are subject to approval by City Council during the annual budget process. Okay, continuing with our level setting some here and looking at the FY25 outside agency, or again, quote unquote, non-departmental process. The outside agency section of the budget is where we capture a few things. There are two groupings that you will see within the budget book itself. You're going to see the organizational subsidy section and the partner agency section. The organizational subsidy section is what largely includes the quasi-governmental agencies. It's where our funding for GRTC, Richmond Ambulance Authority, RBHA, and others is found. And then the other heading that you'll see in the outside agency section of the budget is partner agency. And there's a few things that are included in that partner agency section. So I just want to make sure we're all clear on that. The biggest piece that we're here to talk about today is the competitive outside agency grant portion of the budget. However, when you're just looking at the budget book, you're not able to distinguish what line is one of those versus the other appropriations to nonprofits. But the majority of the lines that you will see in that partner agency section are grants awarded annually via the competitive RFA and review process that the city administers, and then of course, which our impact report is focused on. However, also in the partner agency section that you will notice are strategic city-driven initiatives. These are lines like the Family Crisis Fund, Eviction Diversion Fund, Positive Youth Development Fund, any council amendments that council may make in terms of non-departmental grants during the budget process. If there's an addition made during the budget process that council makes, that's also where it would show up, would be in the partner agency section of the budget. And then throughout the year, if we receive a federal grant that includes a sub-grant, for instance, to another nonprofit, one way to administer that grant via ordinance would be to set up a new non-departmental line for that organization. And so the following year's budget, you would look back and see, okay, in FY24, I see there was a line for $40,000 for a grant to X organization. That's reflecting that transaction that happened during that previous fiscal year. It needs to still show up in the non-departmental line. And so sometimes we've had questions over the years like, oh, why aren't you giving a grant to this organization this year? There's a zero in this current year, but I see last year or 2 years ago, there's a dollar amount. And in most cases, that's because that was a mid-year appropriation as part of a grant that we might have received and sub-granted that would also show up in that section of the budget. And happy again at the end to take questions about that. Just to highlight a few of the other strategic investments, as a reminder that the grant program that we're speaking about is just one of many ways the city is making strategic investments. Health Equity Trust Fund, Positive Youth Development Fund, Eviction Diversion Fund, Family Crisis Fund are four of the bigger ones that many of you are most familiar with. There's also other city managed grant initiatives throughout the year that specific departments may manage. The one that I work most closely with is our opioid work, making grants through opioid settlement funds. Office of Sustainability has managed programs. Our gun violence prevention grants as part of Safer Communities are some other examples that we've been discussing with council recently. Just a quick look at what the eligibility criteria has been in FY25 and FY26. The language we used last year, I think, is sort of helpful. That our approach is to be reasonable but rigorous, and I think in recent years, increasing emphasis on the rigor. And so, sort of quick highlight of what applications, what we expect of applicants through the application process and our competitive grant process, and then highlighting the key criteria that all applicants must meet to be eligible. Many of you are familiar with this timeline, and for the sake of time, I won't spend too much time on it, but do want to sort of look at this thorough, almost year-long process that our city managed process involves. I think it's one of the key advantages of this new process that we hope to move towards, is that there can be a much shorter time between an applicant submitting an application for a grant and then finding out if they're going to get that grant and then getting those actual dollars. Right now, that can be as much as an 11-month process through the city. In FY25, we opened the application process for 2 months in October 1st, began the multi-tier review process December, January, February, before, of course, the mayor introduces a budget in March. We have the budget process. Contract execution can't even begin till July, and in some cases that can be a multi-month process when we were trying to develop and execute dozens and dozens of grant contracts at the same time. And as we've increased the rigor with our contract development, that of course increases the time that's involved in coordinating with the attorney's office, coordinating with the nonprofits to develop a grant contract that everyone can live with. So it can be, like I said, a 10 or 11-month process from when a grantee would apply to when they would find out and actually get an executed grant contract and be paid for an invoice. So we'll do a high-level summary here of just the FY25. Again, we are in the middle of the FY26 grant period. In fact, interim grant reports were just due in the last week or so. And so as a reminder, again, this is the FY25 investment summary. We received what at the time was a record number of applications, 110 applications across those 3 focus areas: arts and culture, housing, health and human services, children, youth, and education. 50 organizations funded. In a couple cases, there's organizations that might have been funded for 2 specific distinct services. So 2 grants, 2 contracts there, total of about $5 million. Again, keeping in mind, when you look at the outside agency or non-departmental section of the budget, you're going to see a total at the bottom that's much larger than $5 million. And that's because of all those other categories and types that I described earlier. For the sake of time, again, I'll sort of just speed through this, but in FY25 and FY26, we had 3 focus areas. In this new FY27 process, we're imagining breaking that out into 4 focus areas, and the DCO will speak to that in just a moment. But children, youth, and education, those 4 focus areas: in-school support, out-of-school time, early childhood, and post-secondary success. And you can see the FY25 grantees in that space on the right. FY25 investments in our largest category by far, which again is part of why we've broken up in FY27 into 4 distinct groups. 27 organizations, almost $3 million in total investments: housing, homelessness prevention, homeless services, workforce development, older adults, community health, quality of life, and health services, particularly health equity focused grants. And then a distinction to note here on the arts and culture category: 9 specific grants that were made. However, one of those to CultureWorks involves them then subgranting to an additional 12 organizations. So one way to look at this would be that actually 21 organizations are funded within this arts and culture category. Okay, just to do an overview of the spreadsheet, the quite lengthy spreadsheet that you all have received. This format was based with a lot of feedback from council over the last 2 years as we tried to provide a few different reports and gotten, I think, really good, helpful feedback on the balance between 55 to 6-page interim or final reports from organizations, and on the other extreme, maybe too high of a summary with not enough detail, just sort of saying, hey, here's who we gave the money to and a little bit about what they did with the money. And so we hope we've found a balance for you all this year. That being said, if the city was to continue managing this process in FY27, I think it would be imperative that the city would invest in a grant software to support a process like this, because it's quite a time-consuming process for administration staff to develop. And I'm not complaining about that. I think it was important that we did, and I think this really was the right balance. But I do think it could be done better by an external grant maker, particularly with grant-making software as a tiny component of that. But what you'll see in that spreadsheet is going to include every organization that was a part of this grant-making process, who was awarded a grant as part of this grant-making process, the category they were funded in, some context by providing an FY24 allocation if they received one, what their FY25 allocation was, the scope of services pulled directly from their contract in most cases, the metrics that they were measuring as part of their final reporting, the goal they set, and their result. As you all are aware, one of the beauties and challenges of the city's grant-making program is we are providing grants across a wide range of service areas and content type. So a wide range of goals and outcomes that we're seeing. And so to create a format in which you could sort of use it for all of them to get a nice glimpse is somewhat of a challenge and an imperfect science, but we really try to, as much as possible, just kind of copy and paste exactly what they're providing in that form, to not put words in their mouth, but to do it in a way that was hopefully consistent so you could see what the metrics were, what the goals were, and results were for all of the grantees through that process. And again, as you all in the coming days continue to look through that FY25 summary, we're of course happy to meet individually or in other ways with council to dive into that more deeply. And if you'd like to see broader context from the full report, obviously we could work on that with you. Last year when we were here, we spoke to both process improvements that have been put in place, as well as process improvements we were working on. And we did execute on those and have added some additional ones. What we've seen in the last 2 years includes our review committee for the first time this past year, also being the ones participating directly in the site visits and monitoring, so they have that closer relationship with that organization, and that they have that broader context from having reviewed the application and then also conducting that site visit later in the year. Based on feedback in the audit, we use an audit recommended risk-based approach in developing payment reporting and monitoring obligations, which I think was a smart move. But again, as part of that, that's a significant increase in the amount of time that needs to go into that, particularly in the contract development portion of the process. An enhanced focus on site visits, performance measures, and compliance, updated interim and final reporting tools, and an enhanced contract development and review process. And with that being said, I will pass the mic.
Okay, good afternoon. Amy Popovich, DCO for Human Services. Great to be here with you, Council President, Council Vice President Jordan, members of Council. So the new fiscal year 27 process, I presented this a little bit more in length in November. Just have a few slides just as a reminder. Here's my clicker. So the fiscal year 27 framework really represents the shift of going to be managed by external grant-making partners. These grant-making partners are going to be selected through an RFP process that is currently underway. We are in this silent period of this RFP process, so we can't speak to everything here. We've got some of our procurement team in the audience who can help guide us to make sure we're steering in the right direction if we need to. But I wanted to make sure that we continue to have this information in front of you. So these represent the 4 categories that grant makers will be applying for and are applying for. These grant making categories are both a reflection of last year's categories and also an alignment of the mayor's action plan. These will have clear defined areas with clear goals and definitions for each of the grant makers. And there'll be key indicators that will drive these grant-making decisions and measure the impact. Each grant-making partner will have a contract, and they'll be contractually obligated to do the work with us. These contracts will include a conflict of interest component, as well as a cap on the amount of funding the organization can use to do the work themselves. This is just a summary of the fiscal year 27 budget allocation process. We are currently, as I said, in that selection process. The mayor's budget will be introduced with an allocation for each priority area. And then we are on target to be able to name those organizations by April during the budget session where Human Services will all come to present that budget. So council will see those names that were selected through this process. Council will adopt the budget. And then once those contracts are signed, grant-making partners will release those applications in July and then be able to make grants by fall of 2026. Just a quick reminder that in addition to these grant-making segment of our non-departmental line, the city will continue to run and coordinate our quasi-governmental agency grants and funding along with our strategic city-driven initiatives. We will continue to make sure updates are posted on our website. Here's an email address that any organizations can have questions and email. We've had a couple of different partner meetings to make sure that everyone was kept updated to this process, and will continue to do so along the way. Thanks.
Ms. Popovich?
Yes.
I was
Do you have any
thinking there was,
questions? Yes,
well,
I'm done.
I didn't know if there was any additional presentation. Okay.
That's it. We're done.
So with that, thank you. And Mr. Barrett, members, are there questions? Council Member Gibson?
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you for the presentation. This is a really great overview of the process, but as we are talking about the impact report, I would like to talk a bit more about the results. And I would request that in future discussions that the spreadsheet that was provided to council members, I believe it was sent to us at the end of, on the 31st, just to, that be a public facing document. so the public can see the summary, but like, we're going to have a discussion about the results and the public can't see them. So I would like to know, for one, how were the targets established that are identified in the report? And can this be updated to include historical data with these metrics? Because, setting a target of a number without seeing the history of what that number has been in the past doesn't provide us with the context for that. And also, it would be helpful to see the cost results as well. So, I mean, for instance, looking at Caritas, for instance, a program metric was identified: the number of households provided essential furniture and household goods, and the target was 450. It's unclear, again, where that number came from or how that was determined. The result was 486. And, if there was a cost associated with that or something, that would also be helpful to know, because Caritas, just as an example, wonderful organization. So, but, we made apparently an increase. So it says here in 2024, fiscal year 24, they were allocated $100,000. In fiscal year 25, they were allocated $450,000. That's a substantial increase. And so, seeing the results, you can't help but want to understand what the additional $350,000 got us. And so, the story is still incomplete, is what I'm saying. And so, but I would also like to hear, what are the highlights in the results that you all have seen, to provide that picture to us and the public in terms of where these dollars are going and how they're being put to use.
I'll try to speak to, I think, all those very good components there. And if I miss one, please feel free to point me back towards that. I think point very well noted in terms of, wouldn't it be great to get that broader context? And my hope is that as we work with external grant makers moving forward, they'll have the tools to make that a little bit easier. That would have been, I think, quite a heavy lift for us to have pulled that in, just the different tools and ways we've done this over the years. But that information certainly exists, and we certainly could provide that, looking back at previous years' targets and actuals for organizations that have gotten multi-years of grants in a row. So I think that's something that we certainly could do, and I would hope that moving forward our grant makers will do, and we can certainly obligate them as part of our arrangement with our grant makers to do that. In terms of the targets being set, it starts with the application, what they're putting in the application. Then during the contract development process, we allow them to sort of start the first draft in most cases, instructing them to pull directly from the application. And because in the application we ask for scope of services and performance measures to be proposed, and ideally proposed in the same structure that they'll need to be in the contract, as well as other objectives and storytelling around the grant. And so we can then review that, both the subject matter experts within the administration and the attorney's office, review those drafts, make our own suggested amendments, and sort of work back and forth until we end up with a contract that reflects sort of an agreed upon scope of services and performance measures. We don't use the language target outcomes in the contract itself. But I think to see those historicals would be very useful. I can understand why you all want that. And I think that's something we could provide moving forward. And then the second part of your question, you used the Caritas, I understand, as an example, but just since it happened to be the example, one piece of context that I hope is mentioned somewhere in that spreadsheet is that at least $150,000, I believe, in that 1 year was a one-time capital investment, a local contribution to a capital investment for their Dinwiddie property, but it still did reflect a $300,000 grant versus the $100,000 in the previous year. So I think, again, that's a good example of why seeing that context to see, okay, what was the target for $100,000 and what are we getting for 300 is very reasonable. feel like there was one last portion that's now escaping me, that you had asked at the end.
Yeah, so I mean, with Caritas, unfortunately, that distinction is not here.
Okay.
So all that it shows here is that the allocation went up from 100 to $450,000. There is a note about the Dinwiddie property,
Yeah.
but there's there's no financial explanation. You know, there's no allocation of money broken down that way for us to be able to understand that.
To understand what portion was for the, gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's unclear. And, you know, like another example, looking at the Better Housing Coalition. So in 24, they were given $39,000. 2025 fiscal year, they were given $60,000. And their program metric is the number of late paying households paying on time for 75% of the year. And I mean, to me, that's a bargain. I think at $60,000, if that's possible. I'm not even sure, you know, how. And the target was 100 late paying households. Again, I don't know where that came from. And it says that the result, 931 paid on time, no breakout of late paying households. So it seems, again, arbitrary. Like, I don't know why that was determined to be the metric when apparently the agency is not providing that type of detail for that metric. But the final question that I asked was, you know, what are the great stories here?
Oh, well, I mean, I think that's a really good question, and I think it's also one of the shortcomings of the current city managed model, is that it takes, I think, additional time and sort of thoughtful analysis to be able to sort of pull out those higher level stories on the collective impact of these investments. It also, I think, takes additional work on the front end to really say, are we building out this model in a way where that's even possible, right? Because right now, I do think this more largely reflects a series of individual investments in a bunch of great organizations doing a bunch of great work versus a high level strategic targeted investment in particular areas saying, here's where we want to move the needle. We want to be moving the needle on these 5 or 6 high priority issue areas. And so we're going to be making investments that allow us to collectively see within the affordable housing space, within out of school time, whatever the case may be, those shifts, and to be pushing within each of these categories for some shared indicators. I think there's always going to have to be some different indicators to make sure that all the organizations that are part of doing that good work have a place for themselves in there. But to see more sort of shared metrics to do that broader storytelling and to know that we're moving the needle in the right direction is where I think we'd really like to go, and it's very hard with this current model. So I think it's a very fair point and fair question that I haven't, frankly, even myself taken a step back and been able to say, like, other than feeling like overall we made some really good investments individually in individual organizations, collectively, what is the story that we see here?
Yeah.
I don't know if you wanted to add to that or
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to put it, you know, final point is that, you know, we're about to enter a really very tight budget situation. And so I think there's additional importance on ensuring that every dollar is being put and used in the most effective way it possibly can be. And so I would encourage the administration, and whatever the process is as part of its budget presentation, to ensure that, you know, these are not guesses, because there are critical needs citywide, and we need to be able to make the case.
I'll just finish by saying, whether we were in a more tight budget year or not, having grant maker partners who have practice at doing this, who have systems, who have that data analysis component, will really enable us to make sure those investments are making the biggest impact.
Thank you. I want to just say thank you for the strategic intentionality in terms of addressing the funding that we provide. Our grant making infrastructure needed build out. Let me put it that way. And so I'm pleased that you have been looking at how it is that we have a solid grant making infrastructure within our city that allows us to be able to answer many of the questions that are, what about the investments, return on investments? What about performance measures, outputs, outcomes, and then the monitoring and the reporting back? So I just want to say thank you for the due diligence in looking at how we've been doing grant making and how we improve on that in a way that allows us to report back to the broader community exactly who, what amount, and what difference is being made. So I want to say thank you to both you and to the administration for that due diligence and strategy. So thank you. And I know there'll be more to come. With that, the next item on our agenda. The next item on our agenda will be the consideration of two papers. And Mr. Clerk, if you would read those in first.
The papers before the committee this evening are as follows. Ordinance 2026-001 to repeal City Code Section 12-46 concerning the disposition of revenues derived from expiration of partial exemptions from real estate taxation and from certain sales of tax delinquent properties, to amend City Code Section 16114 concerning regulations for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and to amend Chapter 12, Article 1 of the City Code by adding Section 12-14 concerning appropriations to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, all for the purpose of providing for the disposition and evaluation of certain revenues for affordable housing initiatives. And Ordinance 2026-018 to repeal City Code Section 12-46 concerning the disposition of revenues derived from the expiration of partial exemptions from real estate taxation and from certain sales of tax delinquent properties, and to amend Chapter 12, Article 2 of the City Code by adding Section 12-48 concerning the disposition of real estate tax revenue for the purpose of providing for the disposition and evaluation of certain revenues for affordable housing initiatives. Both of those papers are before the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. At this time, I'd like to invite the mayor forward. Welcome, Mr. Mayor, to speak to ordinance 2026-001. And while we'll take both of the papers together for the sake of public hearing, we'd like to hear from the patron. Somewhere about 10 minutes should do us in terms of speaking to what you put forward. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam President, Madam Vice President, esteemed members of council. Today is my peaceful day. I'm still on cloud nine from the last couple of hours we spent with Richmond's 19 new best friends, the venerable Buddhist monks. It was a pretty amazing, magical moment for our city. And pleased to come and talk to you about our proposal for funding the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I just want to start by saying, affordable housing has been an issue for years, and you guys have noted that. And so I'm thankful for the efforts of the council in creating new tools, in making investments, in passing new policy, and in particular, Council Member Robertson. You have been the voice of this issue for much longer than I think much of the city even realized we needed to make affordable housing a priority. And so thank you for the decades that you have been the leading voice around this issue. And it strikes me that we would not even be talking about figuring out how to fund an affordable housing trust fund without you at the table. So know that I'm grateful. I want to start also with the fact that we do all agree that Richmond is in a housing crisis, right? I've talked a lot, in fact, most every day somewhere in the city about the fact that housing is the number one issue that our residents are facing, and it's the number one issue that many of our constituents have come to us with on a regular basis. And so I think there really is alignment around our collective desire to prioritize this. We certainly affirm that in our statements. We know that housing affordability and supply need a plan, and we've got to be intentional and aggressive about how to get there. As I said, you all actually named that crisis and passed a resolution back in 2023. And I'll say that we've actually made some pretty positive progress over the last few years. Many of you were at the Partnership for Housing Affordability State of Housing meeting last week. And one of the things they showed was that we have seen over the last 2 years a slowing down of the real estate market. We've seen a slowing down of that year-over-year rental growth. And if you look at that green line there, starting in 2024 and really looking at the last 2 years, you've started to see that rate of increase slow down, which is what we're trying to do. And the way that we've gotten to get there is by building more houses, right? We've actually responded to the supply issue. So we need to stay the course, right? We need to double down on what's working, and we also need to try some new things. And so we'll talk about what those are. But you all also have heard me say over and over, look for it, find it, fix it, right? I came into this job wanting to look for things that aren't working and to address them and to fix them. And this particular city code, the code that outlines how the Affordable Housing Trust Fund was meant to be funded through the roll-off of the tax abatement, has been challenging for a whole lot of reasons. And the auditors are currently undergoing an audit, or we're undergoing an audit by the auditors. So we'll see more about why that is. And we've talked at length about sort of the logistical challenges for our staff. But I think we all also agree that that needs to be addressed, right? And I think both of the ordinance that'll come before you repeal the city code in exchange for a different option and a better option. And I just want to say that, we have worked really hard over the last 6 months to connect, to listen, to try to understand what is it that the operators, the implementers, the administration need, and what is it that our council leadership needs, and what is it ultimately that our residents of our city need. And so what we're presenting today feels like a good compromise of those various priorities. But I also want all of you to hear that we remain open to continuing the conversation and finding a path forward together. So, despite those challenges of logistics and how we've actually funded the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the fact of the matter is that we have, and it's gone really well, right? So over the last 5 years, so back to 2021, the city established a goal, a 10-year goal of 10,000 units of affordable housing. And over the last 5 years, we've invested over $50 million specifically in construction and preservation of that affordable housing from a lot of different funding sources. And that has led to 5,300 units that are either in development, under construction, or completed. And so halfway through that 10-year affordable housing plan, we're actually on track to meet its goals. And so I want everybody to know that what we're doing is working. Now, we have to keep at it, right? We've got to make sure that these 3 things on the left side, which I think we all agree about, need to happen. We need to have predictable funding for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. It's one of the biggest things that our affordable housing developers have said over and over. The predictability matters. Knowing how much is going to be in the pot and what they can plan around matters. We need a dedicated funding source. We have to find a consistent way to fund the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and we need to repeal the existing ordinance. So I think those things we're all in agreement about. The what, there's a lot of consensus around. On the right side is the how, and I think as the administration, my job is to ensure that we're funding priorities, but doing it in a fiscally responsible way, given the fact that there's lots of different priorities. And so how do we make sure that we do both of those things? And so I'm going to kind of jump through the elements of our plan. So the first is that this meets that consistent, predictable amount of funding for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Our proposal is $10 million minimum that would go into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund every year. And just so you know, that it's based, why 10 million? It's really based on getting to that goal of 10,000 new units. And so, we've done a little bit better than 1,000 units a year. Frankly, we would like to even overperform there. And so, but we're really built around funding to the goal that we set as a city. There's been some fear or mischaracterization of the ordinance as you see it, that the obligation is not is discretionary, that we have some discretion in it. And I just want to be really clear that the obligation as in the ordinance that we've written is not discretionary. There is a whole host of shalls that require me to present or to appropriate $10 million into the budget that gets presented to you guys. There's only two exceptions to that. One is if the available funds fall below our required reserve levels, or two, if funding the Affordable Housing Trust Fund at $10 million would somehow impair the city's ability to maintain our required contractual financial obligations that are required by law. So those are the only two scenarios where we would not be absolutely required to fund this obligation. So the other piece of how we've put this together, this $10 million commitment that is in part funded through the growth in real estate tax and in part funded through other funding streams that can flex from year to year. The reason we presented it this way is because when we are trying to build and balance a budget, we know we've got to use different tools and have different flexibility to get there. It doesn't mean that we're not going to fund affordable housing. We're still absolutely committed to doing at least $10 million in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. It's the where it comes that we need flexibility with. And so as we have run the numbers on this, we know that this is a plan that we can afford. We have a lot of different critical obligations. We want to make sure that in addition to funding affordable housing every year, we're also funding education and public safety and water infrastructure and all of the other things that we need to prioritize as a city. And so we have worked this through with our financial advisors at Davenport. They absolutely affirm that the stewardship priority of maintaining flexibility by using different potential streams of funding is the way that we need to go here. Our ordinance also prioritizes transparency. So it requires us to do annual reporting to the council. It obviously allows for citizen oversight because we're funding the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which is our vehicle for citizens to actually participate in the funding for construction and preservation. And then it also mandates a comprehensive review by us every 4 years and a provision of an impact report so that you all in council can evaluate if this is working or not. And remember also, I talk about this often, that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is one tool in the toolbox, right? We have a comprehensive housing plan with multiple different angles, anti-displacement programs, our code refresh, and then our focus on public housing redevelopment. And Affordable Housing Trust Fund is an important part of that, but it is one part of a comprehensive plan here. I think one of the approaches we've taken to a lot of the work that we do is to lean on experts, to bring in expertise. We've got an affordable housing advisory group consisting of some of the members here that you all know. These have been the voices who have championed affordable housing for years and years. They've been very helpful in helping us create this plan. You all have seen this quote from Laura Lafayette, and so know that we've taken seriously the priority of bringing our experts to the table, having them participate in the vetting and development of this ordinance. And I think, I'll close with this. I think we are all aligned around the need here, right? Like we all agree that affordable housing has to be a priority. We've got to fund it. It's got to be a predictable amount, and we've got to have a committed source to do it. I think our hope here is that the financial flexibility about how that Affordable Housing Trust Fund funding is pulled together by the administration allows us to responsibly fund all of the other priorities of the city while naming affordable housing and making sure that it's getting what it needs. We're doing questions after, right? Okay. All right.
Thank you,
So
Mayor.
I will leave it at that. Thank you so much for your time. We made a couple of edits, and so there are copies of the slides here if you need them.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now ask the patron the patrons and the staffer, Ms. Garnett, to provide any comment, overview, et cetera.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam President and members of the committee. My name is Maria Garnett, and I'm a council policy analyst within the Office of the Council Chief of Staff. Excuse me, I'm making sure this. Kylie, can we get the? Sure if there's. Are you able to click through for me if the clicker can't work? There we go. Okay, perfect. I am here to provide a brief overview of Ordinance 2026-018, patroned by Councilor Robertson, Councilor Gibson, and President Newbill, which I will refer to as the member paper, including a side-by-side comparison with the mayor's proposal. The first section of this ordinance repeals Section 1246 of City Code, as does the mayor's paper, which again sought to dedicate revenue to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund through two main sources. One, the expiration of partial property tax abatements, commonly referred to as the roll-offs in 1246A, and through proceeds from the delinquent tax sale program in 1246B. Section 1246 has never been fully implemented and involves significant administrative complexity, particularly related to the roll-offs, as the mayor stated. The member paper not only repeals Section 1246, but also replaces it with a mechanism for providing dedicated funding to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund that is simple and straightforward. Section 2 of this ordinance creates a new section in Chapter 12 of City Code, Section 12-48, which would do two things. One, it would allocate 2.5% of real estate tax revenue to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund each year, which is similar to what we do with allocating roughly 20% of meals tax revenues to schools in Section 1247. It would also require annual reporting about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and its activities to be submitted along with the mayor's proposed budget. This slide shows how much would have been estimated in the adopted budget and then actually allocated to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund from 2.5% of real estate tax revenue over the past several fiscal years. Importantly, we do not have actual numbers for the current fiscal year 26, nor for fiscal 25. That's what those gray boxes on the slide represent. But the most recent year for which we do have both numbers is fiscal 24. Underneath those boxes. That year, the adopted budget expected roughly $438 million in current real estate tax revenue, 2.5% of which would have been $10.96 million. Actual revenue that year was just over $440 million, with 2.5% of that amount being just over $11 million. Lastly, this slide provides the side-by-side comparison of the mayor's ordinance with the member paper. Highlights include the following. As stated before, both ordinances repeal Section 1246. Funding for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund from real estate tax revenue is guaranteed in the member paper, but not in the mayor's, which allocates real estate tax revenues only in cases where there is year-over-year growth. The mayor's ordinance proposes a minimum of $10 million. There is no minimum allocation in the member paper. The mayor's ordinance suggests a ceiling of $12 million. There is no cap in the member paper. Both have built-in reporting requirements for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, although on different schedules. The mayor's proposal currently has a built-in evaluation and sunset potential, whereas the member paper at this time does not. And lastly, the effective date in the mayor's paper is July 1st, 2026, whereas the member paper has an effective date upon adoption. Importantly, since this slide was prepared, Councilmember Abu Bakr has submitted suggested amendments to the member paper, which, if adopted, would enable her to sign on as a co-patron to that paper. We will be working with the city attorney's office to make sure those amendments can get drafted and posted as soon as possible, but at a high level, they involve providing even more detail about the reporting on the activities of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, including the way we are using revolving loans as well as grants and the outcomes from those activities. One of Councilmember Abu Bakr's proposed amendments is also to build in an evaluation and sunset potential for the program, though it would be on a 5-year schedule, not a 4-year schedule as in the mayor's paper. And she is not able to be here this evening, but requested that we at least communicate that here in the public forum. Having said that, I will now yield the remainder of the time for introduction to the patrons of the member paper. Thank you.
Councilmember Robertson as the chief patron. Any further comments before public hearing?
Okay, thank you, Madam President. And thank you, Maria, for the presentation on this paper. And Mr. Mayor, thank you as well for the presentation. Is he not here? We have spent a lot of time working together. I've been meeting with the administration now for several months. And I'd like to say, first of all, that there has been a lot of hard work that have been done over the past few years to address the need for affordable housing in the city of Richmond. And I want to thank my colleagues on council for their dedication and commitment to this cause. I want to thank all of the developers in the community that have been very aggressive and creative and leveraging a variety of different funds to help us get to a place that we can provide decent, safe, affordable housing for people in the city of Richmond and people that would like to live in the city of Richmond. I want to also acknowledge the fact that, you know, I'm sorry that we have two papers, to be honest with you. It was their hope that we would be able to come to a place of resolution through our efforts with working with the administration, that we would have one paper to bring before the council and before the community. This is such a significant initiative. When we're talking about providing housing for people, places for people to live. I mean, you know, we've seen over the last few weeks, we've all seen several people walking the street, pushing their luggage bags or whatever with their belongings in it, being shifted from one shelter to the next. We are a people that are bigger than that. And I believe that we are a city that have enough money that we can afford a lot of things. We can't afford everything, but it's essential that we put money in this budget in places where it is absolutely necessary to make sure that we are looking out for the best interests of all people. Now, many of us sitting in this room have a warm home to go to, probably have more rooms, and I'm one of them, than I actually need to live in. And we don't worry about whether or not we can pay our mortgage. We don't have sleepless nights as to whether we can pay our rent. I went to the General Assembly this morning to speak in regards to a couple of bills. %, if not greater, of all of the bills in this committee were related to affordable housing for the state of Virginia. When we declared a crisis, it really is a crisis. And it's a crisis for a lot of people, a lot of people. It's not just the poorest people in the city. It's not just those that are homeless. The majority of our workforce here in this city cannot afford to live in this city. This is a really, really, really big problem. And I've spent months with the administration trying to work through this because this is not something that we can just ignore. It is not something that have the liberty, in my opinion, to say if this or if that will provide housing for affordable housing. This is not an if situation. This is a life and death situation. It really is. It's also a humanitarian situation that we are dealing with. So it was with great difficulty that I came to a place where I felt that what was being proposed by the administration first failed to agree to some of the things that I thought we had agreed to. And I've made that very clear to them. Secondly, 15% of growth of revenue this year would yield $1 million. A few pennies over. That's an insult to the demand for what we are talking about. Housing is just as important as somebody not having to go to bed on an empty stomach. We should not have food deserts in the city of Richmond, and we should not have a housing crisis in the city of Richmond. There are just some basic things that it doesn't matter what we have to do to find a absolute assured way to fund it, that we don't find a way to do it. Regrettably, I felt, and I said to the administration, just out of the integrity that people place in me, and you hear this every time you hear someone get up and talk about affordable housing, it's very seldom that Ellen Robertson's name doesn't get mentioned, right? I'm not pleased with where we are, not at all. But I did this work before I came on city council. I'll do this work as long as I'm on city council, and I'll do this work after I'm on city council if the good Lord see fit and make it a purpose for me to do this. I will do this because this is really, really critical stuff. Now, we can negotiate and we can disagree with how we go about doing it, right? But I want to live in a home. For my household, I don't want my husband to come home and tell me, okay, Ellen, I've got a guaranteed source of income that's going to cover less than 10% of our mortgage, but I promise you, we're going to make it through the year. No, dude. You got to go back out there and get yourself. That don't work. It just doesn't work. You know, there's some things that every month that gets paid first, right? And housing is one of those things. And when you can't afford it because you live in a city who failed to recognize that their workforce, their citizens don't earn enough money, and we are not willing to pay you any more at the state level than $12 an hour and maybe $15 here at the city. But if you are a contract worker, you get a whole lot less, and we can't find a way to pay you. $15 an hour is not sufficient enough for affordable housing. It just isn't. And if we want people to live in this city, and we do, we gotta ante up the necessary funding to make it affordable for folk to be able to not have to put out 30% of their income into the cost of housing. It's just simple as that, guys. And no, I'm not about proposing to the mayor or to the citizens that we try to balance a budget that is not fiscally sound. I'm not. But neither am I ready, and I will not be ready to approve a budget that fails to acknowledge that the minimum that we can do, 2.5% of the escalated real estate dollars that are coming into the city now. There's no way in my consciousness that I can believe that we can't afford that. I know we can't. The only reason we have 5,000 units right now in this 5-year period of time, the only reason, we had a real bad epidemic that we call COVID-19. $20 million grant money came to this city one time. Now we can brag about the 5,000 units that we built, but 20 million of that plus another 18. Okay, so that's 30. It's one-time grant. Because people that we are talking about right now, the majority of the people that died from COVID are the income level people that we are talking about right now that are spending 60 and more of their money to be able to afford to live in a house. We're not getting that anymore. You know why? Because none of us want COVID again, right? Okay. So this paper, guys, is not sufficient in and of itself to meet the demand for housing. And we're not going to get out of the crisis with just this 2.5. But shame on us if we aren't willing to make a commitment to something that is a promise. That's a promise that we're going to keep this going. And we're not going to find ourselves in a position that the only way we can build 5,000 units of housing is that people have to die from an illness for us to get a free grant from the federal government. That's not Richmond. And that's not what we are going to do. And that's what this 2.5% of real estate tax is all about. And Madam President, I appreciate your willingness to tolerate me. We just spent a whole 2 or 3 hours in the cold speaking about a day of peace. For the sake of not wanting to allow the water that is in my eyes right now to flow, how can we talk peace and not recognize that a simple basic need and a little bit of money guys, $10 million, $12 million is all that we're asking for. We've spent more than that to buy a park in the city of Richmond. I'll yield to the co-patrons of this paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Gibson, any comments additional relative to the paper so that we can move forward with a public hearing?
I have some questions for the administration regarding.
We will do questions once we've completed the public hearing and bringing it back to council.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay. If I could have some idea of how many persons are desirous of speaking to either of the two papers, if you could raise your hands, please. Okay, all right. We will, we have no other persons online, and that is everyone who's raised their hand desires to speak to either paper, correct? Okay, so we are taking both together, so you can come forward and speak to either. You can just line up there. Welcome, Ms. Harris.
Thank you, Madam President and other members of council. Mayor Bula and the administration. My name is Greta Harris. I work at the Better Housing Coalition, a developer, owner, and manager of affordable housing, and a long-term resident in the 3rd District. And I got a chance to hear the monks speak today, and it was wonderful. And as someone who's been an advocate for affordable housing for a long time, it warms my heart that we have both a city council and an administration that are both putting up papers out of, I'll lean to the monks of kindness and goodness to ensure that all of our neighbors have a good place to call home. And my comment is that I would encourage both council and the administration to come back to the table together and craft one paper, because we're in a time where division weakens our power and being together strengthens it, I truly believe. And I'm confident if you bring a few more people around the table, I'm certainly back at work today after 2 months. I'm ready to roll up my sleeves again and try to help craft the how we do this. And I would say whether it's the members' paper or the administration's ordinance, the money is not enough. And I get that we have competing interests and needs in our city. But $10 million is not enough. 12 million, 15 million. I don't think that there is a complete understanding around the scale and cost of affordable housing these days. Just from 2019, we were developing a typical apartment for $175,000. Today, they're north of $300,000. And not every affordable housing unit is equitable. People in the 80% AMI, 100% AMI need affordable housing. We have a crisis across those income spectrums. But to serve the working poor, to serve our most vulnerable seniors, to serve those with special needs,
You have
we
30 seconds.
deep affordability that is only going to come with much more subsidy to make those numbers work. We can do this. And I think given the makeup of the state administration and elected bodies, we should go back as a city and renegotiate the pilot. We have 50% of our downtown not generating any revenue. We need to unleash our economic development folks to find new revenue streams for the city. We can do this.
That's your time. Thank you.
Please come back together, work with actual developers to be able to craft one paper that's going to be good for all neighbors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Harris.
Good evening. Thank you for your time here. My name is Justin Ferguson. I've been in Richmond now for 10 years. My adult professional career, I was a mortgage originator. I sold homes. I was a maintenance technician. I was a leasing agent. I was a regional property manager. And now I'm one of the most active brokers here in Southern Virginia. I sell apartment buildings. I focus on workforce housing. So I look at hundreds of properties every year. I talk to owners about rent growth and expenses and how do they make more money, but more importantly, how can they provide better quality living conditions to their residents. So today I want to really focus on my perspective as being a person that lives and breathes real estate for the last 15 plus years and seen it from every angle. I see the missing middle every single day. And the move from spreadsheet to construction site, I think the mayor's plan does check a lot of boxes. Mostly the $10 million floor, I think that is a major critical point of affordable housing being a big risk, time and money. And if the city can guarantee money for investors, mainly nonprofits and developers to come in and keep rent affordable, I think that is needed. And it's less work for the companies and developers about long-term risk and debt placement on how they're going to finance these properties if they don't know how much money they may or may not get every year. The production requirement, I think that's a really great part of this. It We're in a supply and demand crisis. I speak in numbers and datas and pro formas and rent growth every day. This 75% of this money is going to creating beds, creating homes, creating roofs, which I really appreciate and think is needed. The other 25% will be handled appropriately, but 75% of the money going to creating new units to keep housing affordable. We know from data in this market and in various markets across the country that we need more housing. Richmond has 4,800 units coming to market. If you break that down, out of 100 units, 83 are market rate, 17 are moderate, and 0 are affordable. So the average rate in Scott's Addition in the 4 and 5 class apartments is $1,752. To make that rent, you need $72,000 of income. Average income in Richmond is less than $55,000. So there is a gap. We need developers to create apartments that are affordable for everyone. And lastly, the 15% tax growth. I think it's a great idea. Let's tax the revenue. This is a circle. It funds itself as new apartments come online and come alive here. We will use that money to reinvest back into the city. Let's let the developers see the 15% tax growth within that, so Richmond can see dollar for dollar that their investment into this fund is coming back directly. And lastly, I think there's a many well-intentioned ideas for housing, but we need something that's actually implementable, structured, and appropriate to make sense for developers as well as residents. Residents have nowhere to live in Richmond City, and that's obviously why we're here talking today. And I think it's important that we figure out how we can meet in the middle, because housing is a very important aspect to someone who sells apartments for a living.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson.
Thank you.
Welcome, Pastor Gilliam.
Good afternoon, good evening, council, administration. I want to share as pastor at Mount Carmel Baptist Church in the 7th District, as well as co-president for RISC. We are, as has been stated, in a housing crisis. And in a crisis, people look to their city leaders for solutions that match the scale and the gravity of their problem. So there are two ordinances that are before the committee today that offer different approaches to addressing this crisis. One represents a clear commitment, the other does not. Ordinance 2026-018, co-patroned by council members Ellen Robertson, Kenya Gibson, and Council President Cynthia Newbill, dedicates 2.5% of the annual real estate tax revenue to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. It creates a clear, predictable funding stream for more than $12 million annually to address the housing crisis. By contrast, Ordinance 2026-001, introduced by the mayor, ties funding to projected growth in real estate tax revenue and includes language that allows for the allocation to be reduced or eliminated. One ordinance creates certainty, the other makes funding for affordable housing optional. The money owed to the trust fund is not a discretionary thing or money that's to be redirected when priorities shift. The money owed to the trust fund is the people's money to be used to address this crisis of affordable housing. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund exists because it is the will of the people that a trust fund has a dedicated funding stream. And we've heard concerns that citizen oversight of the trust fund is a problem because public involvement creates instability and predictability. We reject that notion. The people of this city are not an obstacle to good governance. They are its foundation. Citizen oversight is what ensures the trust fund remains faithful to its mission and accountable to the people that it was created to serve. A dedicated funding stream, as outlined in Ordinance 2026-018, is what the people asked for, the people voted for, and what this moment requires. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Gilliam.
Good evening. My name is Reverend Alex Krieger. I'm pastor at Bon Air Presbyterian Church. I'm a resident of Richmond City, 4th District, and I'm speaking to you today on behalf of Richmonders involved to strengthen our communities. I'd actually like to start today by reading a portion of the mayor's proposed ordinance. This is on page 6, and it says, section 2 on that says a proposed appropriation, what would actually be put into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, may be lowered or eliminated if, in the determination of the mayor, the appropriation required by subsection B, C would reduce available general fund balances below required reserve levels or impair the city's ability to maintain financial obligations, or if the director of finance certifies to the mayor that there is a balance in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That everything's about the determination not of the city council, not of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, not of the city, but of the mayor. And in the section right after that, in section 3, it says as well, if the mayor does not does not put in those appropriations, the only thing that's a punishment or requirement is that a paper must be sent to city council. That's the only thing that must happen if the funds aren't put in. There is one message we as RISC have heard over the years, again and again, from our affordable housing developers. It's also the same message that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund members have heard as well from the affordable housing developers, the one building it. And that's if we want to really attack this housing crisis and build real large-scale affordable housing, we need a clear, reliable stream of funding. We have people who want to build affordable housing here in Richmond, and they want to use this trust fund, but they can't do the work and they can't plan the work if when it's time to come to build, the funds are not there. Ordinance 2026-01 from the mayor's office does not give reliable funding. It has multiple contingencies that allow the mayor's office to lower or remove funding each year. It's not a real promise. It's hope that whoever is the mayor during that year feels like putting it in. And we've had a law in the books that requires it for 5 years now. And how many of those 5 years has it actually been funded according to the law? The answer is 0.
30 seconds.
So this new ordinance relies on something that has never happened in 5 years. That is hope without a plan, and that's not something we can support. Ordinance 2026-018 from council members Robertson, Gibson, and Newble is a real reliable source. It is a way to really build affordable housing in our area. It's what the developers want, and it's what we're asking you all to support this day.
Thank you, Reverend Krieger.
Good afternoon. My name is Brenda Hawkins, 8th District resident and risk member team leader, and I'm from Second Baptist Church in the 9th District. The mayor's plan calls for 15% of the projected growth in real estate taxes to go to the trust fund. 15% sounds impressive. It sounds like progress. It sounds like something we want to put in a press release and call it a win. But here's the truth. Property assessments are frozen. 15% of 0 is still 0. If the Affordable Housing Trust Fund doesn't grow, if no new dedicated revenue is added, then setting aside 15% of nothing produces exactly what families are getting now. Nothing new, no new homes, no relief for renters, no path forward for people being priced out of the city they work in, worship in, and raise their children in. Let's be clear. It's not a math problem. It's a values problem. We cannot solve a housing crisis by redistributing scarcity. We cannot meet overwhelming need by promising a slice of an empty pie or even a nearly empty pie. When we say 15% of 0 equals 0, we're not being clever. We're being honest. Honest about what happens when policy avoids hard choices. Honest about who pays the price when leadership chooses flexibility over commitment. Families facing evictions don't need flimsy promises. They need units. They need stability. They need funding that actually exists. No loopholes, commitments. That's why dedicated revenues matter. And that's why an ordinance without guaranteed growth is not a solution. It's a delay. Because at the end of the day, we cannot build affordable housing with good intentions. We can only build with real dollars. Commitment, council, not flexibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hawkins.
Good evening. My name is Drew Wilson, and I serve as the pastor of Common Table Church in the 5th District in the Randolph neighborhood. As we have acknowledged, Richmond is in an affordable housing crisis, and real crisis demands real commitment. In my faith tradition, commitments are sacramental. That is, they invite us to take part in the presence and power of a God who commits to us. So we take commitment seriously. For instance, no couple comes to be married with vows that start with maybe. No church leader is commissioned to serve along with a catalog of contingencies, a list of ifs. And yet for years in our city, despite an ordinance in the books required by law, we have not upheld our commitment to fund affordable housing for our neighbors in deepest need. We all know the history. And on one hand, we have a proposal that gives the mayor's office the same old latitude to welch on a promise to the most vulnerable among us. But on the other hand, we have a new proposal, an opportunity to guarantee a dedicated stream of funding. And as the voice of the people, you have the power to ensure that this funding is for the people and not at the whims of principalities. If you must have contingencies on funding for certain constituents, then let it be for those who already have enough and more, but not the poor. Please, with the poor, at long last, let your yes be your yes. Please vote yes in support of Ordinance 2026-018. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Wilson. Welcome, Pastor Hodges.
Good evening, Council. Pastor Ralph Hodge of the Second Baptist Church, Vice President of RIS. We represent 28 faith communities in our city, with about 10,000 parishioners combined, most living in the city of Richmond. And I don't know that I represent RIS and I represent our church, but I personally crowdfund dollars, thousands of dollars every week for eviction diversion. I've got phone calls, voicemails are loaded with people who can't afford to live in this city. But as my notes, I looked at my notes to see how many times I had approached council about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. My oldest notes date back to 2013, almost 13 years. I've come before this council to talk about how unaffordable it is to live in this city. Back then I was talking about we need $50 million in our trust fund. Several years ago, I said we need 100 million. There should be about 150 million to really deal with the problem. 13 years I've come before this council. It's time to set it right. With regards to the mayor's proposal, we read the fine print. It's flimsy promises. And when the mayor says flexibility, when we hear flexibility, we typically hear flimsy. 15% of tax growth, when there's no tax growth, is 15% of nothing. You can't build anything with a flimsy foundation. You can only build with a firm foundation. And that's why I believe that the proposal brought before council today that is patroned by Councilperson Robinson, who has been faithfully and dedicated to this work. And we appreciate that. That proposal, 2026-018, provides a firm position, a simple plan to use the housing tax to support more housing, more funding, consistency, reliability. This proposal puts housing as a top priority, not with flimsy promises, but with a firm foundation. I beg you, council, I implore you, this council needs to make sure the goals are met as far as bringing in more affordable units in this city. On this day of peace, when I get calls that people can't afford their rent, they're not at peace. When you have stable housing,
30
you have
seconds.
peace. I've been a teacher for almost 30 years. My son's a brand new teacher to this city. He can't afford to live in the city. People need peace. Stable housing brings peace. We need a firm foundation with regards to our priorities with regards to affordable housing. Let's bring peace to our city, to those who struggle to make ends meet.
Thank you, Pastor Hodges. Before you speak, are there any other persons desirous of speaking in the audience? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Tom Fitzpatrick. I'm a resident of the city of Richmond. I'm also the Executive Director of Housing Opportunities Made Equal. I'm agnostic to what the solution is that you're trying to find, but I applaud you for trying to find a solution because we need to continue to invest in affordable housing. I echo what my colleague Greta Harris had mentioned about how I hope you guys can come together in a joint resolution to this. The one thing that I did share with Lawson as she saw my input about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund was to remind her that those funds cannot be used for services. So as you hear about folks that are in pain right now, as you address the budget crisis or the budget challenges, and we heard earlier from DCAO about the new plan on how to handle non-departmental funding, just remind you that the money that goes into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is for new units, but it's not for the services folks need. And so I applaud the council for the amount of money you've dedicated to helping people with the non-departmental funds that you've used over the years and the ones that you're going to dedicate this year too. But I just want to make it clear that I think that when we look at the holistic picture of affordable housing, it's not just units built, but it's the support we provide to those people too.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzpatrick. Mr. Clark, I think you indicated we have no persons present online, correct? Desirous of speaking?
That is correct. We have no one online wishing to
Thank
speak.
you. Thank you. The public hearing is now closed. We greatly appreciate your feedback and comments. Thank you. Bring the discussion back to council. Councilwoman Gibson.
Thank you, Madam President. I have questions for the administration.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Lawson Rajasaria, Chief of Staff. I'll represent what I can and I'll look to colleagues if I need them.
Thank you. So my questions are primarily around the difference between the two papers, obviously. And from my perspective, the key, one of the key differences, or there are two. One is the simplicity of the two, but then also is this the notion of discretion. And I think that the notion of discretion is a critical piece to this because essentially that's why we're here. The body adopted law, city code, that was intended to establish dedicated funding to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And while it was codified, which implied, required that to happen, it did not. So essentially, the law on the books now, for whatever reason, was effectively discretionary. And what was, I think, especially upsetting for folks who have been so close to this going back to 2013 and prior to that, is that for the past couple of years, it wasn't like we didn't agree on the amount and an amount went in that could be debatable whether it was accurate or not because we couldn't figure out how to do the math. Nothing. There were the money that was for those historic credit roll-offs. That money simply did not go in. So right now we're here to solve the problem of an existing law in the books that was effectively discretionary. And so I think it's really important that we that as we move forward, we address that. On page 10 of the presentation that Mayor Vula provided, it says in big letters, and highlighted in red, that the obligation, the $10 million obligation is not discretionary. And I question that statement, given the language that's been highlighted, which says very clearly that in the mayor's proposal, a proposed appropriation may be lowered or eliminated if. And so I'm curious what the how is the administration able to reconcile having that statement in the paper and then also stating very clearly that the obligation in their paper is not discretionary?
Yeah, fair. Thanks so much. I think at a highest level, it is similar to what my understanding and what I feel like's been explained to me of why the clause of, subject to council appropriation is at the bottom of pretty much every law we write, because the financial inputs and outputs of our government are ultimately settled in the budget process. And so what we were attempting to do, and and maybe we haven't made it all the way there, need to continue to figure that out. When we were working with the attorneys to say we were actually looking to put more restriction on ourselves than the attorneys were really comfortable with, because we wanted to say this 10 million, this is what we're doing. This is what we're committing to. It's a minimum of 10 million. So it's not just the 15%. It's a minimum of 10 million if that 15% doesn't get us there. And so it states the shall, and then the attorneys gave us the idea basically of saying, okay, well, kind of if there does become a reason that you don't like, that you are incapable of doing that financially, then give them something else. And so that was a come to council and have to defend it, have to say why that's true. So it was our attempt actually to make it less discretionary, but I understand, I understand where you're coming from. And the fact is, even with, I don't think anyone's all that interested in kind of relitigating the past. I think that's some of what I understand that we were trying to solve for, because there was money going towards those purposes, and actually more money than would have been, and that there is money that actually has been put in the reserve that council hasn't appropriate. Like, it's just, it's part of what has been complicated about why we're trying to solve this. So.
Yeah. I'm sorry. If when the language says in the determination of the mayor, does that not the same as providing the mayor discretion?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
It does. Okay. And I'm wondering, and just also, I think it's important for the public to be aware, we talked about the legal team. The two papers on the table have both been vetted by the legal department, correct?
Yep.
So, and the paper that that myself and other members have patroned does not require this same opt-out. So in this section, which I believe is, does provide discretion, it references these are the levers that could, open the door to not doing it. One of which is if the general fund balances fall below required reserve levels, or impair the city's ability to maintain fiscal obligations as required by law. So my question now is around those required reserve levels. I'm wondering where are they published? what are those required reserve levels? And did you discuss potentially including more definitive language around that in this paper?
Yeah, I cannot answer that off the top of my head, so I can definitely get back to you on that.
Okay. Thank you. And then my final question is really it's again about the presentation. I mean, so there were folks that were listed in the presentation as supporting it. Were they all provided with both papers to compare, and as they are noted as having endorsed the mayor's version?
Yeah, so let me be clear. So we have put together that broader affordable housing plan that the mayor referenced, all 4 components to it, and that we had sought endorsement for that plan overall. And then all of the folks that are listed, I believe, except for one, are in our housing advisory group, and they were provided both papers and even a summary of, hey, we've been working together. We're still working it through. And there was an email summary to the whole housing advisory team. Yes, that
Thank
was
you.
about I think it was right before they were introduced. I can't remember, or right after they were introduced. Yeah.
Thank you.
And that does not include Dante McCutcheon. He is not on our housing advisory team.
Thank you. Vice President Jordan.
Thank you so much, President Newbill, and thank you to everyone who came out and spoke to this. Appreciate the administration working on it. Appreciate the members' paper and the time that Councilmember Robertson spent with me, reaching out to me to explain her work on it and her passion for it, which is clear and obvious. I would like to make a motion that we forward both of these to the full council without recommendation. We have an amendment by a council member who's not able to be here tonight to discuss it. This is not one of our more normal committee meetings where we would have a larger audience, I think, to help us come to a vote. And we're got a virtual member and another member who's out. So for consideration, my recommendation is to forward both without recommendation to the February 9th council meeting. I echo Ms. Harris's comments and Mr. Fitzpatrick's. I would love to see if between now and then we can come up with a common paper that gives us both commitment and flexibility. Because I think to me, flexibility is not a bad word to me. Anyway, that is my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President, for the motion.
That's a second. Second.
Thank you. With that, Mr. Clark.
Committee is now voting on a motion to forward ordinance 2026-001 and ordinance 2026-018 to council with no recommendation. Ms. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Breton?
Aye.
Ms. Jones?
Aye.
Ms. Robertson?
No.
Ms. Lynch?
Aye.
Vice Chair Jordan?
Aye.
Chair Newbill?
Aye.
That motion has been approved.
Thank you. With that, those papers will move forward with no recommendation, allowing for full vetting of certainly the amendment that was brought forward by Councilmember Alba-Bacher, but also an opportunity to look at the possibility of coming with a unified housing plan reflective of administration and council embodying comments, feedback that we've heard from the audience today, as well as other additional items that we might consider. So with that, members, the next item on the agenda is reports of standing.
Madam President, may I have just a closing comment as relates to this before we move forward?
Closing
The vote
comments.
has been
One second,
taken.
I can't hear you.
Yeah, I'd like to speak since I'm the only one that voted in the opposition to this. And I want the audience to know that we have continued to try to work to a place of resolve, and we will continue to do that. Certainly, this is one source of funding, and it's certainly not adequate. It's not. This crisis is not going away. And we have a meeting scheduled as of tomorrow at 5 o'clock with the administration again. Painful. I've sit in the seat too long now. Almost I'm getting a little bed sores, I think, or chair sores. But, you know, I just want the community to know that no one is walking away from this, and we are all open to any creative strategy to get us successfully where we need to be. And so, yes, we're meeting tomorrow. The mayor has already called his task force on affordable housing together for a meeting on Wednesday, I think. So there are a lot of developers and a lot of people that are in the process of helping us with great ideas that are coming to the table. I am a part of that task force. I'm grateful to be there and look forward to the discussion. But only thing I want to say to the community is that we cannot accept less than what we've already committed. And we need to find ways to get closer to where we need to be. And this paper alone does not get us there. We know that. But we cannot afford to accept something less than we've been fighting for since 2013 and even before. So I voted in opposition because this is not satisfactory to turn down what could be a foundation. But I want you to know that the dialogue and the discussion is continuing with the effort that when we come back, I promised you that months ago, right? That it's going to be better than what we already had. And that's what we're looking for. Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Council Member Robertson. And with that, are you left over from before? You have a comment?
Yes,
Okay, Councilmember Gibson. I'm sorry.
yeah, I wanted to talk under discussion items. I would like to discuss the ice storm.
Okay, before proceeding there, and I'm not sure if administration, we have folks present to address it, but I'd like to go to reports of standing committees first. And if it is my understanding that summary documents for each of the committees have been mailed out already. And so unless members have, the chairs of those committees have anything else to add, we will accept those reports as sufficient report outs. Seeing none additional, that concludes for reports. I am not sure the administration has anyone here desires or able to speak to that item. Ms. Gibson? Yes.
Mr. Donald would be appropriate for the.
I understand. Mr. Donald? Councilmember Gibson had a question about the ice storm, and I guess for me at least, if there's opportunity just to update where we are. I know that. Okay. 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 That would be appreciated. And we'll take the questions and we can get them to Mr. Donald.
No,
Mr.
I would like to.
No, for whatever you wanting. So we will report.
I would like to ask the question.
Sure.
Thank you. The question is, I mean, I think it would be really helpful generally that when we have weather incidents like this, that we have an agenda item to discuss it as a matter of standard protocol. That would be my first thought and request to the body. Um, uh, I I do think that understood this was a storm. How it came to be was not as we expected it. Obviously, the scale of the incident was immense. And I appreciate the work that the city did to address cold weather shelters and streets as the city was able. I'm thinking more looking forward. We have a lot of money that's been going into what we've been calling a rainy day fund. And I'd like to understand if ICE qualifies for those for the use of that funding. And I know that, Richmond is not a place where we get a lot of storms. Um, and as a result, when storms happen, we're not at the same ready that other places are. I grew up in Boston, right? But because of what's happening with our environment, the storms are becoming less predictable. We are seeing immense winds in the summertime that are taking trees down. We're seeing, this storm and the ice and the impact of that. And when these things happen, while it might just be a couple of days and not seem like a big deal, the ripple effect is significant for folks. I mean, people who are making a living, getting hourly wages, they might not have received wages for a week. Businesses are not able to, see patrons because people are, hibernating in their homes. And so it would be really helpful if the city could take a pulse on the impact of this particular storm, how it impacted the city, how much we spent on the storm. This is something I think is really relevant as we're going to be moving into the budget cycle. And the impact, I think it's both ways in revenues that we're not seeing from meals tax collections to what our belief is that, businesses that were shut and the financial impact on them. And then to have an understanding of the rainy day funds that we have at our ready, and what is the lever by which we decide we need to use them. I just think that it would be really helpful for the public to appreciate what that rainy day looks like. And I know over the past week, as people have been home and frustrated, being able to provide answers to that type of question would be really helpful for myself and I'm sure others.
Thank you. And Mr. Donald, I know that at some point there'll be an after event report that will be prepared that will capture a lot of the information that has come out of the Emergency Operations Center meetings that I certainly have participated, as well as RJ and Councilwoman Jordan. And RJ has gotten that information back to, we've been trying to push that out, but I think certainly that report will be helpful. Hopefully, any reimbursements the city can get. And then, as Ms. Gibson is also asking about other resources that we can put into motion. So look forward to that after event report and the additional questions. Would anything else? Okay. 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 Right. And we just ended the declaration this morning, correct? Okay. So then it's all of that closing. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Members, with that, the agenda for today's meeting has been accomplished. And I want to thank everyone for their feedback certainly for all of those who came forward, most of it gone, but for the feedback, comments, and additional work that we will continue to do relative to this item. Thank you. This meeting stand adjourned.